Arknights. If you've been watching this channel over the past week, you've likely noticed that the video style has changed to a degree. And as a result, I do want to shift more into variety, but I also want to discuss more openly my thoughts on different video games that I have played and why I've dropped some or simply won't play them. And so given the long-winded review of Genshin Impact that I made, I want to make one for Arknights. This won't be as heavily edited as the Genshin Impact review simply because I don't think that's necessary for this style of video, and this style of game doesn't necessarily require that either. So with that being said, let's talk. If you've been following along with this channel, you've seen my journey into Arknights from starting the account to building up certain characters, the stages that I've done as you've seen that in background footage. You've also seen and witnessed my rants about certain stages or different sections of the game that I didn't necessarily like, or mechanics even, such as auto deploy. If you've been in the Discord server,
Laffy is fucking hot.
Yes!
What? You just instant won?
This is fair! Capitalism!
Gene again. Versus Anaki.
Dude, the name
Hey,
of
Anaki, jump off.
you've likely seen more of that from me getting bored or me doing different things or me talking about things I dislike or even asking questions when confused. I have, for at least a month, attempted to actively get into Arknights. I've been doing the event, I've pushed into the event, I've gotten different characters, you've seen my roles in the event that you were in the server, and if you participated in the discussion or have watched the VOD, which is available via the link down below, you've heard about the opinions of general individuals in the Discord server regarding Arknights itself. And as a result, I kind of want to give my solid opinions after a month of playing. Mind you, I'm not a year-long player, so I understand that many mechanics may have changed or be very different from how they were originally or a while ago. At that same time, this is from the perspective of somebody who was relatively new, tried to get into the game, got into it, got a bunch of different characters. I have tried the gacha system, and I have put some degree of money into it. And so, with that being said, we're going to start off with the positives first, then moving on to the negatives. First and foremost, Arknights has an amazing soundtrack. I don't think anyone is going to disagree. At least the vast majority of the music you hear in Arknights is pretty good. And I can't necessarily speak on different languages because I don't speak all of them, but from what I hear, I like the voice acting in different scenarios for different characters. I understand that all of them aren't voice acted in terms of English voice acting, but nonetheless, the current roster is pretty good nonetheless. And I'm happy that they're adding more to it as we go on. I think the character designs are pretty good. Now, I won't speak on the differences in variation between a standard unit versus them at E2 because that can vary depending on who you ask. And that can also vary depending on your expectations as well as how its skins add. But overall, from a basic standpoint, each unit has a very unique look and design, and I do like pretty much all of them. So I would say the top recommendations and my top points that I could give to Arknights would be for character design and for the music. I played other gacha games that have a sort of lobby system in the same way that Arknights does, i.e. you have your missions on the side, you have the character you want either in the middle or off to the side, and you do have the background itself. And I think Arknights is okay. I'm not saying the lobby is exceptional, it's not awful, but it's just there and it's not bad. And to be honest, I've seen some bad lobby screens, and you know what? It's hard enough to get a good one. So I'll consider that a positive on the front of Arknights. I've mentioned numerous times that the community itself is pretty willing to be helpful, and I do think that still stands. Arknights does have a pretty good community that's willing to advise you on different units, which units are good, or who you should go for. Alongside that, you also have the information regarding upcoming banners or shop units, and that overall is a pretty helpful thing to have. Whether or not that's translated well to new players can entirely depend on where you're getting your information from or what you're trying to communicate to them, so results may vary. Now, as much as I do like the Arknights characters and do have a vast majority of them, for instance, I love and adore Golden Glow. She was my first 6-star unit, and I built her up, and I believe she was my first E2 unit as well. Alongside this, I have Misaki, and if you've been in the Discord server, you kind of know that I usually have a couple messages of him pinned. These are two of my favorite characters in terms of design and in terms of just overall aesthetics. Not to mention their artist is wonderful. But to get deeper into characters themselves, it's also one of my issues with Arknights. Overall, I've tried to get into the individual units of the game by reading their backstories. I've attempted to get into the story of the events, integrated strategies, and the main storyline itself. And ultimately, I don't find myself enjoying the way Arknights does its story. I understand that many individuals do like this story, and I understand that there is a deeper story to it, but for me, it's just not interesting. Even though I like the character's design, I don't find myself caring, even after reading their entire story. And so with that being said, it's very difficult for me to want to care about the concept of alters and their story when I don't care about the basic versions I have now. It's very difficult for me to invest myself into more units or into the general story or mainline content of the game if I don't care about what's going on. Essentially, it means that I'm playing the game just for the tower defense aspect of it, or even just a simple gacha aspect without caring about the characters, the story, what's happening, or why I'm doing anything. And I've mentioned numerous times, I think the story and characterization of a game is essentially half of the game itself, especially with gacha. If you don't care about what you're doing about the characters themselves, then you're only looking for designs or gameplay power. And if that's the case, you could just pick 2, 3, 4 units, summon for them, and that's it. Because there are certain extremely powerful units such as Ling. And the concept of waifu over meta relies entirely on whether or not you enjoy a character's design or their personality, as opposed to just gameplay. I've mentioned numerous times that I like Blue Archive because the characters are really nice and the characters have a great design. The relationship storylines add a bunch of characterization and personality to each of the units that you get. The sub-storylines for each of the clubs helps with that, and the events flesh out them as well, once more, especially if they're used to introduce a character to the story or introduce a unit you can now pull for, such as the Wakabo event, which is around Valentine's Day. Blue Archive also did an exceptional job with each of the events or holidays, giving unique voice lines for characters that you have already. And so with that being said, when I'm comparing the games that I like and the games that I enjoy and what I look for in characters, Arknights doesn't necessarily have that. I don't feel emotionally attached to any of the units in the game. So ultimately, unless the gameplay is really interesting to me, it feels very dull and like a bland experience. The gacha itself, in terms of the animation, I was discussing this with a couple other individuals, how we feel about different gachas we play. The animation is quick and I enjoy that, but the problem is when I click on or clicking through the headhunting bag, especially if we've done a 10 pull, I essentially either have to skip the entirety of it, or I have to individually wait for characters to finish their entire dialogue before I can move on to the next unit in that poll. Mind you, it's not necessarily once they finish speaking, but once the dialogue finishes being shown on screen. Even then, that's a bit of an issue because I don't really care about a lot of these units. I care about the 6-star or the 5-star. And the gacha itself is iffy. I don't find it to be the most rewarding gacha. I don't find it to be the most fun gacha. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy the challenge of the game. That's fine, but the challenge alone isn't what carries me through. And the slight issues I've had here and there from the Annihilation, still, I don't think that right now, at its current stage, with the Annihilation tickets, I don't think that solves the entirety of the issue with Annihilation itself. It mitigates it, and don't get me wrong, it's there, but it really should have been here early on. There's no repeatable option for stages that you're farming. If I need rocks, I need to farm a stage over and over and over again. And this doesn't involve me saying, okay, farm this stage X amount of time. This involves me having to watch it on screen, click back every 2 minutes, and then go back and do something else, which makes the game feel more tedious. And I understand in the grand scheme of things, these are small issues, but ultimately, if you build up a bunch of small issues and small annoyances, when I'm building up a character trying to E2 them, okay, now I need to farm out this stage again and again and again and again and again and again, and I need to farm it out over and over, it takes an extremely long time. And then to get them to E2, yeah, they're great. But now all my previous auto deploys may be messed up if they were integral to the team. If Texas is the Vanguard I constantly deployed out on every mission or every stage I was going through, and now she's E2, or maybe she was just easier basic standpoint when I first used her on all those stages. Now she's E1 or she's E2, that has increased her cost, which overall can ruin a bunch of my previous auto deploys. This means that the downside for me E2ing and building up a unit is that every other auto deploy is inherently affected by that cost. When had I chosen to leave a unit at the exact same state, they would have been perfectly fine in terms of auto deploy safety. And you might think, yeah, that's a fair trade-off given the circumstances, but it's a nuisance because now if I go back to farm a different stage, maybe I E2'd them one day, went to sleep, woke up the next day, now I'm farming again, now my auto deploys are messed up and I have to individually go through. This is even worse on Annihilation in that now I have to watch them kill 400 enemies just to get back to my previous state. And yes, the skills are great. Skill 3s are wonderful, especially for certain units like Surtur. But you can't necessarily say building up a unit is a net positive when there is a negative in terms of your overall efficiency or your time investment. Because auto deploys have a chance of being messed up by that, especially if they were either you didn't have enough leeway or you barely skated by deploying the unit early on. Skins don't necessarily feel impactful because they're just meh. If I'm talking about the base, I have Blue Archives Cafe, and that's way better in my opinion because I can make it look better. I can customize the characters, do their own stuff, and have voice lines that they say. If I'm talking about being a casual game, Blue Archive's a better casual game. And I don't like to compare these games because they're very different. But inherently, if I'm looking at them from the standpoint of a casual gacha game, Arknights to me hasn't met up to what I've expected from other games, and I'm damn sure not going to compare it to the games that I consistently play. So if I'm talking about Blue Archive, a game that I play pretty rarely, I may play it twice every 2 weeks, then I at least feel happy when I log on and can do a relationship storyline. In Arknights, there's nothing driving me to play it other than to get footage. And that's not what I want to play a gacha game for. And yes, I want to give it a fair evaluation. I want to make a full-fledged video like with Genshin Impacts, but the problem is I don't like playing the game enough to do that. And at the same time, don't just want to drop it, because I do want to get to chapter 10. I do want to go back and say, here's my final thoughts on the story of Arknights, or here's my thoughts on this character or this altar or whatever. And I will at some point, but I wanted to give you my thoughts on it right now in the current state of the game. And I will probably play other games. Neuro Cloud release, there's Nikkei. In the Discord server, we do variety events. And so I want to branch out, and I don't want to just leave Arknights and be like, yeah, that's my experience. No, this is my experience. I'd rate the game right now as a 5 out of 10. It's nothing special to me. I was more invested in Epic 7. This isn't me bashing on the game because I hate it. I don't think it's awful, but I think that there is a lot that I dislike. And if it's not for me, it's not for me, and that's fine. And if you enjoy and you have a fun time, great, perfectly fine, play the game. But especially with what I've seen in terms of the interactions in the Discord server itself, or what I personally thought, and individual interactions that people have told me about or have DM'd me and discussed, there are issues, not just with the game. People think the community is elitist, and this isn't just what you've heard, this is what we've seen. You have individuals who don't necessarily feel comfortable voicing their complaints about the game, and that's because they really don't feel like the player base, as of right now, at least the veteran players, won't accept those complaints. Or like the frustration with slightly annoying mechanics is instead interpreted as difficulty, when to a lot of other individuals it's just bad design. So overall, I like the game. It's a decent game. It has a good tower defense system. The character designs are nice, but there are a bunch of issues that just push me away from it. So as of right now, I'll be working on a review for it. It may come out this week. It may come out next week. I don't know. But hey, we have a Discord server, so if you want to join the Arknights people there and have fun, feel free to do so. But either way, my name's been Anaki. If you've enjoyed this video, feel free to leave a like down below, consider subscribing, and hit the notification bell, you know the usual, and I'll see you next time. Bye.